Hey, Lisa, how you guys doing? The other day I was just kind of thinking about, remembering the first time I ever saw a universal remote control. I remember thinking, man, this changes everything. And that is your joke of the day. All right. For today, we're going to finish the 1980s. And so you have looking at Ronald Reagan and looking at Ronald Reagan, the Cold War. And so historians believe that this is the guy who won the Cold War. So how the heck does he do it, right? So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today. In addition, don't forget the do now. Reading your do now responses from the last class was kind of interesting. So I guess rap is not our thing. Okay. So today you get Sondheim. Maybe that's a little bit closer into our wheelhouse. Well, we'll see. Um, but yeah, other note is that on Monday, I know our class doesn't technically meet on Monday, but on Monday I'm not going to be around. So I'm actually going to finally have that surgery on my knee. So yeah, so if you need me for anything on Monday, and I don't know why, but if you do, if you email me or whatever, I probably won't be around, won't be able to get back to you until Tuesday. Okay. So I hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and talk to you guys later. So today we're going to talk about Ronald Reagan and the Cold War. And most historians give Ronald Reagan credit for winning the Cold War. So how does he do it? So first off, and again, we think we alluded to this last class, is that he steps up the Cold War rhetoric. So gone is all the détente, the cooling off of tensions. Instead, Ronald Reagan ramps it up through massive increased military spending. He refers to the Soviet Union as the evil empire. He tells jokes. For example, when he's warming up a microphone, he starts counting down in a microphone instead of counting up to check the volume levels. And as he count down, he actually then says, "We will now commence bombing of the Soviet Union." Right. So he's doing these little things, sending the message to the Soviets that he actually means it. And of course, the Soviets then have to respond to this through their own increased military spending, because now you have a new arms race. And center to Reagan's plan is something called the Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI. And so basically what SDI involved was the United States launching satellites into space. And these satellites would be armed with lasers, and that any missile that would basically be launched into the atmosphere, and as it entered American airspace, it would be shot down by these satellites. And so it was a hugely expensive project. It would never been truly been proven to work, but Reagan was willing to invest heavily into this. And of course, the Soviets couldn't match this dollar for dollar. And of course, if we had a defense, if we knew that we could not be hit by a Soviet missile, there goes the idea of mutual assured destruction, right? So that if we do not have to fear any type of retaliation from the Soviets, that would make us potentially more willing to use weapons as a first strike. This really freaked out the Soviet Union. So this was controversial. It's weaponizing space, which is something that people were against. And so Democrats actually derisively referred to this as Star Wars, thinking that this would, by making fun of it, they could maybe get rid of it that way. Reagan, being Reagan, loved the name Star Wars, stuck with it, used it repeatedly. And of course, the American public, it kind of resonated with them because they had seen the movie and kind of understood what Reagan was trying to do here. The Soviets, though, are put in a bind here. And so the new Soviet leader at this time is a gentleman by the name of Mikhail Gorbachev, and he is the gentleman all the way on the left on that screen. And Gorbachev and Reagan actually meet and have summits to kind of talk about this threat. And Gorbachev is a different type of Soviet leader because he's an economist. He's not coming out of the military. And that sends a signal to the United States that the Soviet economy might be in trouble. And so with the Soviet economy in trouble, Reagan steps up even more defense spending, basically forcing the Soviets to decide, are you going to spend your limited financial resources on weapons in this arms race, or are you going to spend your money on your people? And Gorbachev realizes that, I cannot continue to spend dollar for dollar with the United States. So Reagan and Gorbachev negotiate arms reductions. And what you get is something called the INF Treaty, which actually eliminates almost 2,500 missiles in Europe. And it's the first time that these two powers have sat down and actually agreed to reduce existing missiles. All other arms treaties had been about testing, they had been about experimentation, development, nothing about existing missiles. And so for the first time, you actually have a reduction in these missiles. Um, and Reagan, in these agreements, actually does not have to give up his dream of Star Wars or SDI. Reagan and Gorbachev actually strike a pretty good friendship. These two men will become very good friends. Their wives will become very good friends. And what you really see as a result of this is a thawing of the Cold War through these two men being friendship. I mean, this picture here, see Gorbachev visiting New York and standing in front of the Statue of Liberty. Ronald Reagan actually went to Russia, went to Moscow, and walked around Red Square as a tourist, meeting Russians. Gorbachev, on a visit to Washington, D.C., at one point actually got out of his motorcade and walked. And people ran up to Gorbachev because they recognized him, shaking his hand, asking for his autograph. He was treated as a celebrity here in the United States, to the point where when his time as Soviet leader was over and the Soviet Union actually collapses in 1989, Gorbachev comes to the United States through the urging of Reagan, teaches at Stanford, and actually gets a deal with Pizza Hut, doing Pizza Hut commercials. But through charm, negotiating from a position of strength, Reagan manages to win the Cold War. And while the Berlin Wall won't fall during Reagan's time, that will happen during the next president, which is George H.W. Bush, who you see on the right of the screen. It is Reagan and Reagan's policies that bring an end to the Cold War and also bring an end to the Soviet Union.